Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
Blessed are those who with a noble and generous heart take the word of God to themselves and yield a harvest through their perseverance.
Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
King Herod heard of Jesus, for his name had become known. Some said, John the Baptizer has been raised from the dead. That is why these powers are at work in him. But others said, it is Elijah. And others said, it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. For Herod had sent and seized John and bound him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because he had married her. For John had said to Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to kill him. But she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and kept him safe. When he heard him, he was much perplexed, and yet he heard him gladly. But an opportunity came when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his courtiers and officers and the leading men of Galilee. For when Herodias' daughter came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, ask me for whatever you wish, and I will grant it. And he vowed to her, whatever you ask me, I will give you, even half of my kingdom. And she went out and said to her mother, what shall I ask? And she said, the head of John the Baptizer. And she came in immediately with haste to the king and asked, saying, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And the king was exceedingly sorry. But because of his oaths and his guests, he did not want to break his word to her. And immediately the king sent a soldier of the guard and gave orders to bring his head. He went and beheaded him in the prison and brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl. And the girl gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard of it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Some years ago, there was a bit of a stir in the eastern part of Europe when they discovered very ancient relics, it would seem, major ones of the trunk of John the Baptist. And because of the simple cryptic way in which they had been kept hidden, it gave credence, and immediately the common people responded with great devotion. The more cryptic and simple, quite often the more authentic it risks being. As regards the other part of the body, it is reported that a serious part of it, at least, is in the church which bears its name in Rome, one of the Paleo-Christian churches, San Silvestro in Capite. Now, in Capite simply means in or on the head, and the actual construction of the church indicates that it was made to house it, for just there above the high altar is a grate or grill which would have contained it. Now, the Palatine fathers who have the care of it tend to keep it in a more discreet place, but they do have the unbroken tradition that it is certainly part of the ancient relic of the head. John the Baptist himself is a puzzling part of our history. He was the greatest of the old and the bridge with the new. He is looked unto as a model also for Christian monks, for in the monastic orders St. John the Baptist is always important. And he is in the succession of the prophets of old, especially Elijah. He is, as it were, a reproduction of his charism just before the Lord's coming, for which he is the immediate preparation, or prodromos, the forerunner. He, however, does combine in his being the contemplative and the active, in that he rejoins Elijah, for he is a voice coming from that silence where the voice has been perceived. And all powerful preaching comes from encounter with the Word. Otherwise, it's more of the same thing, the man giving of himself. With regard to the specificity of this feast, it is also a time of transition. We are in the period immediately after the Constantinian peace, the Edict of Milan. In 312, there had been that very important victory at the Milvian Bridge, commemorated still in the frescoes in the ancient baptistry of the Lateran. On the walls one sees things of the time, and in particular this which has just happened, that time is there. The labarum, the banner, is to contain by divine instruction the cross. In this sign they were to conquer. And although at great risk and disadvantage, they nevertheless conquered. And it was the beginning of the end of persecution. However, the emperor was up against the fact that there was the Eastern Bloc. And although in the West, the Edict of Milan in 313 had its effect immediately, in the East it was not the case. And Licinius was still persecuting for a while. And in this persecution, therefore around 314, was caught up the young, at least at consecration, Bishop of Sebastia in Armenia. He became very popular, and there are historic reasons for that. Although what happens in the case of these early martyrs is that the written record comes much later than the origin, which is transmitted orally for generations. He is one of the 14 holy helpers. So, he was ordained bishop early in life at Sebaste, and under this emperor in the east, Licinius, and the prefect Agricolaus, he was cruelly tortured and eventually beheaded. The instrument of his torment in iconography is one of those combs used to comb out wool in the preparation of it. Therefore, it was not dissimilar to the grueling torment of St. Bartholomew, who was flayed alive. It would seem that he was the son of rich and noble Christians. In this persecution, he hid in a cave and blessed sick or wounded animals. Now, in this we find traits in common with the Desert Fathers and also the Celtic saints. It's as though the harmony of Eden were retrieved. Once, it is reported, a woman brought him her boy, who was at the point of death because a fish bone was stuck in his throat, and he healed him. When he was imprisoned, the same woman brought him food and candles. And we have the blessing with the candles blessed yesterday, Candlemas, the blessing of the throats throughout the Catholic world. Still very popular. What is interesting for the English-speaking world is that it's an example of resistance to officialdom. They couldn't stop devotion to St. Blaise in Protestant England entirely. Canterbury claimed relics of him, and at least 4 miracles were recorded at his shrine, one dated 1451. Parson Woodford described a solemn procession in his honour at Norwich on the 24th of March 1783. His feast has always been on the day after Candlemas. It is a day when one sees the sensus fidelium. In fact, Bishop Smith had a story about when he was a young priest, how in Tuttle's Pass he was saying Holy Mass one day, and this happened. This is years ago. It was a very forward-thinking priest who had a full church for the feast of St. Blaise, and he didn't have the patience to bless about 300 people individually with the crossed candles. So he invented a rite of his own. He got hold of the large candelabrum used for benediction, held it over the whole assembly and prayed over them, and made the sign of the cross with that, once and for all. The people weren't amused. They all went to another church, invaded it, and waited until the priest patiently blessed all 300, 400, or 500 throats, the sense of the faithful. All over the Catholic world, these throats are still blessed. And our Catholic faith has a certain quaintness about it, ancient and still virile, which we should not intellectualize and allow to evaporate just like that. There is one big difference between our cult and that of our Protestant brethren. It's that of the element of the body. In general, Protestant worship is based on 2 strong elements, the word and the mind. Our Catholic cult contains also quite a lot of contact and bodily movement. Hence, the palpable and the tangible comes into the contact. And therefore, soul passes unto soul via also the physical. It's the sacramental world, both that of sacraments and that of sacramentals. And it is, in the experience of priests, not indifferent in the vicinity that one has with the people of God. For with regard to blessings, anointings, the giving of ashes, all in which the body is the instrument of contact between the soul and between the Spirit of God and the Spirit of man, there is that warmth of God that passes. Our touch is the touch of Jesus, and we must not be shy to use it. Through the intercession of St. Blaise, Bishop and Martyr, may God preserve you from all ailments of the throat and every other evil. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O sacred heart, our home lies deep in thee. On earth our exiles rest, in heaven the glory of the blessed. O sacred heart, O sacred